everybody listening at home, I want to give you a little bit of an idea what it's like to eat with a Dave Kellett. If you're sitting there in a restaurant and you happen to have a Dave Kellett sitting across from you at the restaurant. This is brilliant, by the way, because it happened all through the weekend that we were up in Santa Rosa for the Charles Schulz Museum. Dave has this thing where the wait person comes up and they're ready to take the order. Very busy. There's all open tables all over the place. Person comes up and Dave will hit him with, what would you suggest? The person's like, listen, I just want to take your order. Dave's like, yeah, but I'm new here. What would you suggest? And then the wait person always says the same thing. It's always, you know what they say? They go, and you can say it along with me at home. Everything is good. Everything is so good. You could pick anything on the menu; it would be good. And Dave's like, yeah, but you know, I'm new in town and I don't know my way around. Just if you could suggest something for me, if you could just suggest something. And then finally, with a sigh, the wait person says, oh, you know what? You know what I really like? I really like the Manhattan clam chowder. Dave says, really? The wait person says, yes, they use a little bit of garlic in it. It's got some nice chunky russet potatoes, some big clam. It's the best clam chowder I've ever had. Dave says, that's wonderful. I'll have the cheese quesadilla. And every freaking time we went to so many restaurants and Dave asked for so many suggestions and he'd never take them. The wait person walks away and I said, why do you put them through this every time? You ask for their suggestion, you beg for their suggestion, and then you go ahead and order what you're going to order anyway.
This is a long-standing problem for me, is that I'll look lovingly up at the wait person and I'll be like, hey pal, what do you got for me? What's your favorite? Oh, I love the braised chicken here. It's amazing. You can't go wrong with the chicken. Oh, that's fantastic. I'll have the tuna casserole then. That's lovely. And my wife goes, why do you ask them? Why do you put them through that? And then you pick something else. And I think what it is, Brad, if I'm being honest about it, I think what it is I want them to tell me the thing that I was already going to pick is wonderful. But I want them to do it of their own volition so that I can get excited about the meal coming. Like if I was going to have the chicken sandwich, right? And they're like, well, I'll tell you what's really good is the chicken sandwich. Brad, a butterfly awakens in my heart and flies forward to the moon. It's so excited. And then I have like 5 minutes of anticipation. Like, oh, I ordered the right thing. I got the chicken sandwich. That's what I wanted. And it's what the wait person said was the best thing to get. Oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy. But then if that doesn't happen, I'm like, well, they didn't pick the chicken sandwich. I'm going to go with the chicken sandwich.
Oh my God.
And so that's what it's like traveling with Dave Kellett. And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab and the show about making comics.
And making a shrimp quesadilla from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive-In Sheldon, who did change his order at the wonderful Mexican restaurant to the what she recommended. She did recommend something, and I changed my order. Anyway, I'm also the co-director of Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We have a huge show today. We're going to be talking about social media. We're going to be talking about AI again, which we haven't circled around on in a couple of weeks. But before we do any of that, we want to talk about our fantastic sponsor for today's show, which is DreamHost. It's dreamhost.com/comiclab. And Brad has been using and loving DreamHost for nigh a decade, I think. And
9 years plus. I just found this out. And by the way, this is one thing I got to tell you about why I love DreamHost so much. So I have tweeted about dreamhost.com/comiclab just as part of the show announcements that go out and stuff like that. And somebody said, hey, do you really like DreamHost? I said, yeah, and I've been using them for so long. I can't even find the sign up email for when I signed up. It it has to be like on an old email server that I don't use anymore. It's been that long. The next day, I get an email from DreamHost customer support. Said, "Hey, Brad, I just saw your kind words on Twitter. I wanted to let you know I looked it up. You've been with us for over 9 years, and it has been an absolute pleasure to be able to serve you all that time." Now, stop. Hold on. I'm a nobody. You know, you can look at my Twitter. I don't have some kind of outrageous audience that they would like be worried about what I'm saying.
Right.
But that's DreamHost. They saw somebody saying that and they're like, "Oh, we can look that up for them. We'll go out and we'll go the extra mile. We'll look that up," which means that not only are they super nice people, but they also, this occurred to me when they said in over 9 years.
Yeah.
I left my day job about 10 years ago and to become a full-time self-employed cartoonist, which means that on my journey of being self-employed, a independent cartoonist, DreamHost has been with me every step of the way.
Brad, when there was one set of footprints, Brad, but they literally carried you out of your corporate job and into your own independent life. That's quite a thing.
Yeah.
And this is not the first time.
It really is.
That kind of personalized service has happened more than once with you. You've said repeatedly that they've gone in and said, "Hey, we noticed that you had a customer service request about this. We also noticed you messed up 4 other settings. Can we fix that for you?"
Yeah, that's what I mean. They're always going above and beyond. And I've said, like, when I've screwed something up, I'd had to put a support in. Of course, you know, the first line of defense for all of these companies, it's always you're like, "Hey, have you checked our library?" Because a lot of stuff, it's dumb things. If you're me, that it's like, "Oh yeah, did you plug in the computer?" You know, that kind of stuff. So they've got to kind of knock you down with that line of defense. But when you've gone through that very easy to make sure that it's nothing simple that you can handle yourself,
right.
You put a support ticket in and you get either a call back or an email back, whatever you sign up for. Their support staff calls you back and you are talking to a person. It's not a chat bot. You can tell very, very quickly by the nature of the email, you're dealing with people, and not for nothing, you're dealing with people who care. Yeah. And that's why as we talk, and by the way, here's a little spoiler alert. We're going to be talking about the Twitter meltdown again because it's got so many ramifications for independent creators across the spectrum, comics and everybody else. And there's a lot of stuff we've got to start shifting into talking about strategy pretty soon and what we're going to do about it. One of those strategies that we're going to hit really hard today, tomorrow, and next month is that you need to have a website. We talked on the phone, Dave, about a reporter who said, I've been posting my content on Twitter for years. My entire archive is on Twitter. How the heck do you could download it all, but it's like, how do you sort all that stuff? How does somebody find it? How does somebody search it? It's a real mess. This is why you need a website in your life as a cartoonist. In the past, we were always like, hey, when you're ready for it, you know, it's nice and easy. Right now, it's a red flag. You need to get on this. And the people you need to do it with, in my opinion, is DreamHost.
So here's what you want to do. You want to go to dreamhost.com/ComicLab. They put together a special page, a landing page that introduces you to 2 plans. You've got the shared starter, which is $2.59 a month. Or you've got the shared unlimited, which is $3.95 a month, both of which are bonkers good prices, by the way, I think, in terms of what I've paid in the past. And so jump in, try it out, get yourself started, because as Brad said, in this time of social media falling apart, frankly, on more than just Twitter's front, between Facebook and Meta in general and all sorts of other sites, you're going to want to have your own place. So go over to dreamhost.com/ComicLab. What we want to talk about at the beginning of the show here is Twitter's continuing meltdown. And make no mistake, even though as of today, even though it has not broken, it is on a glide path to breaking, in the sense that, like, have you ever had a car where the check engine light comes on? You can still drive it for 10 miles, 500 miles, 1,000 miles. Yeah. But eventually that check engine light is going to come back to haunt you. And when you fire or get rid of somewhere on the order of 3/4 of your staff, there's going to be enough engineers in there where only one of them knows how to do certain check engine lights, you know what I mean, or knows how to pull over and fix that car in a certain way. So yes, the car is still driving. Yes, Twitter's still up. Yes, it may stay up, but boy, it's going to get increasingly stumbly and increasingly hackable and increasingly problematic as it goes forward, at least for the near future. So, Brad, the thing I wanted to start with in the beginning here is that I, for the first time in this process, got angry because I realized we are going to pay a price for Twitter falling apart. And
you're right about that.
I hadn't codified that yet in my mind because I was more upset about I'm personally going to miss the sort of Twitter. And just a reminder, an update for everybody. Brad and I have taken Twitter off our phones. We still use it professionally. We're still posting our comics there because we're trying to maintain a pragmatic approach. So my personal first response was sadness in that I'm losing my friendship connections, right?
Yeah.
But now I'm sort of getting mad that I'm going to lose a decade's worth of professional connections. And there's kind of no good way to rebuild that.
No, we are we're screwed.
Yeah,
we're screwed when Twitter's either gonna collapse in on itself or it's gonna do a long fade. Very, at least in my opinion, I think we can see this coming down the pike pretty easy. That this is it might be a long fade like MySpace, or it might just collapse. We might just go to it one day and it's just not there because, like you said, a lot of those software engineers have left, and Twitter was written, as far as what I've been reading, on a code that's not particularly popular. So Musk has brought in a lot of software folks from Tesla, and they're like, we don't know this software code. We don't understand the language this is written in. So one way or the other, Twitter's going to start to go out. And by the way, I it might be my imagination, but I can feel it already when I put outgoing messages in. Right.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen is we're going to start sending out outgoing messages on Twitter, and the people that we usually connect with are just not going to be there, or they're not going to get delivered that message.
Well, can I ask you this, Brad? I'm already down 3 or 5% of my readership, and frankly, nothing quote unquote has happened yet. So I'm already down, and I can't speak to your readership. I'm saying readers rather than users because I like to think of them as coming for the comics, but. But the fact that they've disappeared when nothing truly has broken yet, and don't get me wrong, small things are breaking. Like I uploaded photos the other day, image slices of a comic, and it put them in the wrong order, even though I hand did it 1, 2, 3, and it reversed them. I have no idea why the software would do that, but you're starting to notice small things breaking, right? And yet, in the meantime, I'm already down 3 to 5%. And I've heard some people, certain kinds of audiences are already down as much as 10%. So it's not going great. I mean, how do you can't capture those people again on another platform. I've tried. I've been evangelizing about, hey, go to my mailing list, or hey, go to this, or hey, go to that. Some people are like, look, Twitter works for me. The other things don't. I don't want a mailing list. I don't want to be on an email list. I don't want to go read your blog. You know what I mean? And so it doesn't.
Well, and it's worse than that. It's not, you're lucky. Number one, I'm going to confirm my Twitter followers are down, significantly down. I've lost a lot of folks, and I see a lot of people signing up who are clearly not people. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yes. I have seen that. Yes.
Sign up, and you look at that, and you're like, you are a bot. I can see this. You look at their feed, and it's like, this is a bot. Now I'm losing people, and I'm gaining bots, and that's not good. Right. So that now I will confirm for you, number one. Number two, hey, thank goodness if you got somebody who actually says back to you, I don't want the mailing list. I like Twitter, blah, blah. What I'm finding is that they're just fading away. There's no goodbye message. By the way, I always roll my eyes. You see a lot of people posting stuff. Hashtag just in case. Hashtag just in case Twitter falls. Here's where you can find me. I'm at Mastodon and co-host and PixelFed and and I'm like, do these people actually think that we're all sitting there taking notes? We've had a continuous scroll social media experience for so many years. And by the way, we all do it. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Is somebody actually thinking that somebody's going to see their hashtag just in case message, stop their scrolling and say, wait, Brad is also going to be at Tumblr. And nobody's taking notes.
Yeah.
These are silly messages. Nobody's taking notes. They're fading away. And the bad thing about all of that is that for the last couple episodes, Dave, you and I have kind of chuckled our way through. Well, looks like Elon Musk is really making a mess of Twitter. And I was starting to plan out my next year, and I wanted to do a Kickstarter in the first quarter of next year.
Yes.
All of my messaging for Kickstarter traditionally has been Twitter. We've talked about we don't get any traction on Instagram, Facebook, forget about it. All of my messaging, all of my planning, every Kickstarter I've ever done, it's been daily posts on Twitter. That's how I communicate. What effect is this going to have on stuff like Patreon outreach, on Kickstarter campaigns? As Twitter continues to fade, and if it actually implodes, like I kind of think it's going to do one day, Dave, what do we do when we've lost our major way of communicating with our readers?
Here's a small sample, and it'll give you a sense of how this impacts my career and why I'm getting increasingly angry about it the more I think about it. Is that sometimes I will post an eBay piece. I tend to spend a little time on my eBay pieces, and they go from anywhere from, I don't know, the low would be 75, the high would be 500, right? But here's the thing. If I forget one week, Brad, to post the link on Twitter, I'll notice it on the eBay because I'll go to look at it. I'm like, why is it only at $40 still? This is weird. And then I go, oh, dang, I forgot to put it on Twitter. I go and put it on Twitter. Within an hour, it's shot up $150, right, for that eBay piece. That's just a small example of how, like, when I go to kickstart my next book, it's going to be a difference of $500 to $5,000 missing because I don't have Twitter to communicate to people with, right? You know, and this is presuming that things really truly do start to fall apart. As of now, they're sort of stumblingly still working, but so a part of me is getting mad because we're paying the price for a malignant narcissist taking over Twitter and ruining the damn thing. Yes. And I'm so bummed about it because here's the thing. I don't know what the solution is here, but I feel like we put too much weight on Twitter. You know what I mean? We put on our career too much weight on what Twitter could do for us. And as we always say, put many legs under the table. So we kept up Instagram, we kept up our websites, we kept up blogging, we kept up the comics. But we also put too much weight on one leg of that table, which was Twitter, I think. And now we're paying the price.
I mean, listen, you're right. But it's also, you can't beat yourself up too much for that, because that's like saying, that's like if we were a company in 1963 and we said, oh man, we put too much emphasis on the telephone for communication. Well, the telephone is what you had. I mean, that the telephone was the most powerful means of communication in 1963. Right. So if nobody in 1963, as other communications started to happen decades later, none of those people said, oh, we should have been using the telegraph more. You know, we should have been using this other thing that like that. That's why I see people say, well, I'm going to keep using Instagram. That's like when you realize that the phone system isn't good. Hey, I'm going to keep using I'm going to start using the Telegram. Well, you know, there's a reason that you weren't using the Telegram in the first place. Yeah. It didn't work.
I mean, listen, you're right. But what I'm hearing when you say it like that is it's also a kind of a business speak version of don't be sad because it's over. Be glad because it's happened, you know, that kind of thing.
That's absolutely right.
I mean, so I guess we just have to say, like, look, for 9-10 years, Twitter was really helpful to our business. And now we just got to pivot the best we can away from it, like we did when advertising fell apart in that 1 to 2 year period there. And just for flashing people back, there are businesses were largely cemented on a model of advertising where you would pull up Sheldon or you'd pull up Evil Inc. and you would be served between 1 and 4 ads across the website of differing price points and differing weights. And it made a significant income for us for a while there. And when it dried up overnight with ad blockers and with everyone realizing they didn't want these malicious ads on their sites. And so we had to pivot over a very quick 6 to 24 month period. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen here with Twitter. But now I'm what are the stages of grieving? Now I'm at the anger stage where I'm like, God damn this man for ruining this. Because did it have problems? Absolutely. Did it have things that needed to be fixed? Absolutely. No one's disagreeing with that. But to burn the whole thing down at this point just makes me angry because I can't easily rebuild that social network. It's like a coral reef system. When certain parts of it start to die off, the whole thing, is eventually going to go within the next 5 or 10 years. I can already see parts of Twitter dying off, becoming less lively, and then the whole coral reef of Twitter is going to go in the next 5 to 10 years. Like, it's all going to go, and it bums me out.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I want to take a quick tangent because, and I was going to do this before the show, but we'll do it as part of the show.
Okay.
We've got to talk about nomenclature here because we've talked about major shifts in webcomics since the beginning.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And the first major shift was we went from kind of like online pseudo syndicates to everybody having their own site. That was really the first major shift.
That's true.
Okay?
Yes.
The second shift was social media. Because we all had our own sites for quite a while. Then all of a sudden social media came and it changed the way we were doing outreach at that point.
Right.
The third shift was crowdfunding, which completely changed the way we did our business. Right. I'm going to argue, and I want your thoughts on this. Is this the fourth major shift? And if so, what's the best nomenclature we can use to discuss that?
Well, first of all, that's a great summation. And I would also insert there that the loss of ads is another paradigm shift somewhere in there in that. We had
I'm going to argue that the loss of ads and crowdfunding are one and the same because when we lost ads, that's what made us turn to crowdfunding.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I could see that argument, but that was a lucky happenstance. They didn't necessarily revolve around each other, but yes. Okay. Agreed. So we switched. I see what you're saying. The switch from advertising to crowdfunding. Yes. To distributed fundraising. Yes. Right. So that I can learn what word did I use incorrectly? Is it, you want to say shift rather than, here's just a clarification.
It's not an incorrect thing. I want to talk about because I'm thinking about putting a headline on this podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do we call this episode? Do we call it the fourth wave of webcomics? We don't want to call it webcomics 4.0 because that whole 0.0 thing has really gotten toxic, right? Do we call it the third? Calling it the third shift or the fourth shift sounds like it's a shift at a factory. What's the nomenclature that we want to give this? Because we're going to be talking about this for we're in the middle of something that way back when we started this 4 years ago, we said that the next big change is out there.
Yeah.
I've got a real feeling that we're in the middle of it. And I just wanted to see if you had any, and we can go past this and talk about it later. I wanted to see if you had any thoughts on what we call this fourth phase of webcomics.
So if calling it the fourth phase, I think a simpler way to call it might be just if we refer to it as, oh shit. Like, I think that would work. Because no, you know what it is? I do feel like I felt when ads dried up in that there is a moment in a paradigm shift where change is happening, change is occurring, sometimes it's occurring to you, not with you. It's occurring to, it's coming at you, not with you, but you don't yet have a good solution. You don't yet know where to apply your skills or your abilities. And that's kind of me right now, is that I'm in the shift. Yeah. I know the shift is happening. I know the shift is happening to me. I don't yet know, because it's going to be 6 to 24 months, which of these new or upstart social medias is the next step. So I don't yet know where to apply myself,
So let's talk about that. As Twitter leaves a power vacuum in social media.
Ooh, good phrase. Yeah,
we see a lot of people, and we talked about this last episode. We see a lot of people saying, "Well, everybody seems to be going to Mastodon." Yeah, right. That's the one that everybody's talking about for the most part. Everybody's moving to Mastodon. And I got to tell you, Dave, I am going to, if Mastodon is the answer, I'm going to eat my hat. Everything about Mastodon tells me Mastodon is not it. And I feel so strongly about this that I'm going to expose my ignorance that isn't actually ignorance.
Okay.
Are you ready for this story? And I will.
And then
make
Brad stands up and his pants are on backwards. Here we go.
Yeah. I'm going to make a confession. I've signed up for Mastodon 3 times.
Okay.
And I only now, last week, figured out that I've only successfully signed up once. Now, I know that we make jokes on this show. Brad's a big dummy. Brad's an old man. Brad doesn't know how to do this. Brad drives too fast in a Toyota Tacoma. Well, I know we made a lot of jokes. But I want to tell you something. One thing I have done is I've run a business on the web for 22 years. I've signed up for more sites. I've registered for more services on the web. I've signed up accounts at more websites than most people have pimples on their behind. I sign up for a new website every other week because I have to as part of my job. I know how to sign up for a website, and I signed up for Mastodon 3 times, and I just now figured out that I haven't signed up at all, except I just finally signed up, and that's why Mastodon's going down in flames, not only because it frustrates the hell out of me, because if I can do it, and I'm just barely on this side of stupid, if I can't do it, most of the other people out there aren't going to figure out how to do it either.
Yeah, because listen, I want my 70-year-old readers to be able to find me on the new social media site as much as I want my 20-year-old readers. No, I'm not throwing Brad under the bus as though he's 70. Right. I'm saying, like, if it's hard for me at my age, who's lived online most of my adult life, and I'm not saying, neither Brad or I are saying Mastodon is hard per se. It's not like we're pushing a rock up a mountain. We're just saying, like, it's harder than it needs to be. It should be put in an email, and you're often running within minutes of a confirmation, that kind of thing. And so... I agree with you, Brad, that for me, Mastodon, in fact, in different ways, Mastodon and a couple other sites failed a sort of Costco sampler test. And by that, I mean, you can't get a quick and easy idea of, is this even for me? You got to jump through 9 hoops with Mastodon and with a few other ones to even see what the hell it all is. And where am I supposed to go? And how am I supposed to do this? And what do I see when I eventually get there? And am I seeing the right thing that people are seeing? Or am I somehow messed it up? And what is everyone else seeing versus what I'm seeing? Like, you could, for example, go to, without downloading any app, go to Brad's Instagram, my Instagram, Chris Hallbeck's Instagram, and you'll get an approximation of this is what you're going to see on Instagram when you go to see, when you sign up for Chris Hallbeck, right? Same is true with Twitter. You can sort of test the waters through the web and see what's going on. What I'm getting at there is that you get a little Costco sampler of what it is, and this is even for you. Is this what you want to sign up for? I don't even know with some of these, like what the hell I'm about to get. And then they make it trickier in terms of signing up. A lot of that is just growing pains as they get a little VC or angel money and they can start to staff up. You'll see Hive or Mastodon start to get better about their sign up process, and their servers will get better to handle the load, because frankly, they're all being crushed right now because everyone's like trying to move past the violinists on the Titanic and get off the ship as quick as they can. But I'm saying a lot of these aren't quite ready for prime time, and you feel it when you go there. You see it because the Costco sampler is not available, and it's just not quite ready for prime time yet. So what I'm getting at is, this is what I was saying before when I was saying that I don't yet know where to apply my skills. Do I apply my skills to Hive? We don't know yet. Do I apply my skills to Mastodon? We don't know yet. Do I apply my skills to some weird new Belgian website that'll come out 3 months from now? Maybe. We don't know yet. Like, it's going to take, like Brad said in the last couple of weeks, it's going to take a weird shaking out period where people are like tentatively saying, hey guys, I'm trying out Bleep Blop. Come see me, ? On Bleep Blop. I'm going to park my name at least over there. I'm not sure how this is going to go.
So shifting to strategy a little bit, do we tell our listeners, Dave, that they should be signing up for every one of these just in case one of them's the right one? Because,
no, I wouldn't direct my listeners anywhere. I mean, worst case, best case, I would park my name if you're concerned about it. But I don't know that I'm driving anybody anywhere for the next 6 to 8 months, which means this is what I'm getting at. It means I'm losing people in the meantime on Twitter who are actively leaving and who I only had contact with via Twitter. They're actively leaving. I only had them by Twitter, but I don't know where to direct them, because it's a fire hose in different directions. Do I put them to Mastodon, to Hive, to Bleep Bloop, to Glorp Glop? I mean, it doesn't matter which one you want to pick out of a hat. Who knows if it's going to be around or be the one that wins out in the social media wars here in the next 6 to 18 months.
Yeah. And there's a lot of them. There's co-host. I signed up for co-host days ago. I still haven't heard back. Hive Social is another one. There's a ton of them that are going to be out there. I'm kind of doing the same thing, Dave. I'm parking my name to make sure that if that one is the one, I'll have something to go to. Pillow Fort's another one. If that ends up being the one, then great. But in terms of strategy, I'll tell you, and this is a theme I've had for the last couple episodes too, and I really do believe it. In terms of strategy, I think it's time, and I know people are going to laugh at me. And no, I'm not going to say RSS, but I do think it's time to dust off the old time webcomics playbook. And it's time for some of us who knew how things were done back in 2001 to start going back to those old game plans. It's going to be back to the website. It's going to be back to paying attention to things like SEO. And it's going to be back to doing things like, and I'm not kidding you, web rings and lists of other comics that this comic likes, right? Remember those lists always on the left or the right-hand side of the traditional webcomics layout? And it would say, hey, if you like this comic, you should try out any number of these. And they'd go down the list. You still see those out in the wild sometimes. I've taken mine off, but guess what? It's going back on. And I'm going to start reaching out to people who are doing similar things to what I'm doing. And I'm going to say, hey, we need to get together, and not for nothing, we need to think of the 2.0 version of what a web ring is, and we need to start bringing that back because the website is our stronghold as social media atomizes and becomes dispersed, and we need to start leaning into that strong.
So first of all, I want to agree with you that I think the website, we've got to start leaning back on that. But here is my fear with that, is that we have had 5 or 10 years of all of us, myself included, who have completely changed our habits online into these walled gardens of social media, you know? And so first we all went to Facebook, which is its own walled garden. And we went to Instagram and Twitter, and then we went to this and that. And getting people back on websites is going to be hard in the same way, Brad, that when I decide I'm going to improve my health, the first thing I start doing is denying sugars, right? Like, I'm like, no, I'm not going to have ice cream, but it's harder to add working out, right? Like, that's the second step that's harder to do. It's easier to deny myself. So right now, it's easy for a lot of people to deny themselves Twitter. I mean, even though that's hard, it's easier to deny Twitter than it is to say, and I'm going to add back on a 30 website trawl every day. Like, who's actively choosing to do that again? I'm not. And so I don't know I don't know that is going to work. I want that to work, but like, you might say like, well, Dave, it's time to start blogging again. Is anyone going to read that? I don't know that I'm going to seek out blogs. When they were new and novel around 2005, that was fun. But I don't know that I want to go around and see what everybody's writing in their blog in 2023.
But to be honest, the only reason we really did blogging was for SEO, because we were doing comics that couldn't be spidered, they couldn't be searched by Google. So we did whatever we had to do to put words on there, right? And you saw a lot of derivations of this. You saw some people who did blogging. You saw some people who put transcripts of the comic in that space just so it could be searched. I'm telling you, I still go ahead. What do you think?
Well, no, what I was going to say was I just wanted to add to that by saying I'm old enough to remember back in the days before browsers were semi-cloud backed up. Sorry, that I chewed that sentence. And when you would lose a computer, when it would really break, like, oh my God, my hard drive died, my whole computer's gone, I have to go get a new computer. Or you would break a computer, or you'd go from college to your first job, or your first job to your second job, and you completely switch computers. Do you remember the phase, Brad, where you would completely lose all of your browser bookmarks? And you just had to start over, and you're like, well, I think I went to the New York Times, and then I think I went to that comics cartooning forum to chat, and I know I would check out Brad Geiger, and you'd sort of have to rebuild it. But then every once in a while, you'd find a computer for 10 years ago, and you'd boot it up, and you'd look at it, and you'd be like, oh my God, I remember all these browser bookmarks. I don't go to any of these places anymore. I feel like that's what's going to happen with a lot of these Twitter folks. We're just straight up going to lose them. We're never going to be able to capture them because it took us 10 years to get there. And like you said earlier, in terms of the hashtag just in case, no one's getting out their mini golf tiny little pencil and writing down where Brad is on Tumblr and writing down where Brad's mailing list is. No one's doing that. I'm not doing it. We're just all assuming that Twitter, if and when it does die, will just start over again. But we won't remember all those, virtual browser bookmarks that we had, like we did in the 2005.
Absolutely right. Yeah, I had that same experience, Dave, when I opened up my Safari browser because I switched to Chrome years ago. Yeah. And I opened up my Safari browser for some reason and found all these old bookmarks, and they were all sites that I used to go to every day that I'd forgotten about years ago. I want to bring up something. I want to give you credit for this because you brought it up to me on the phone this week, and I wanted to hear you expound on it. But this is the perfect place to say, to mention for all of those people, and I count myself among them. We're always a very beleaguered bunch of people, and I'm speaking specifically about story-based comics artists, right? Not short form, what we would call a gag strip, but people who are doing long form comics on the web. We're always beleaguered because we're always convinced that it's so hard to be us. And we've talked about that in the past. It's valid. There are some things that make it very difficult to be a long form story comic artist. However, a point you brought up to me is right now, there's no place you'd rather be.
I mean, yes. So continuing that line of thought that we're just going to straight up lose people in this sort of Library of Alexandria way, like things got burnt and they got lost and nothing was ever recovered from this in terms of data. So these readers will leave Twitter and we'll never get them back. But here's the one weird shining light that because I have a short form and a long form comic, I can say this. People will probably, there's a noticeable percentage of people that will never again seek out Sheldon having left Twitter because it's a one-off comic, it's standalone, it's humor-based. There's nothing really to pull them back. But I think my long form story of Drive, which is now in year 9 or 10 or whatever, I don't even know, those people will seek out wherever Drive might be online. If they can no longer get it on Twitter, they'll be like, I think it had a website. I think it had a Patreon. I'm going to go find that because they're into the story now and they want to keep it going. But I think I'm going to lose a big chunk of my short form readers, but I'm not so sure that I will lose a big chunk of my long form readers. Do you, I mean, am I wrong in thinking that?
I'm 100% on board with that. I think this is a great time to be a long form comics creator because we've got that going for us. And we're going to need to rely on that. The good news is here's the other side of that coin is, social media is going to get atomized when we go into whatever replaces this, whatever it ends up looking like. Those short form comics artists are going to have the edge because that's going to be the thing that gets people's attention again.
Right.
So it's not like they're out of the mix. But right now, I'm very happy I do a long form comic. I will say this, going back to that WebRing thing. And by the way, I'm just going to put this out there. If anybody is a coder and knows how to code that, I've got thoughts. Get in touch with me. I've got thoughts. Get in touch.
I just want to say, if you're a coder and you've got the ability to code what Brad is talking about, I want you to reach out to the guy that signed up for Mastodon 3 times because he's got some great.
That's right. I got thoughts, damn it.
This is the guy you want to partner with, by God. You want to get this guy on the phone.
That's right. Get me on the telegraph. I'll be over there. Right back at you. No, but because I know it drives some people crazy when I say this, but I'm going to go back to it again. When I find out, when I got a new Patreon backer and I'm onboarding them, I send them a 1-question questionnaire. How did you find out about my Patreon? 76% say my website.
Yep,
now,
that's true.
I know what people are going to say. They say, well, wait, yeah, but how did they find out about your website? They probably found out about the website through social media. That's fair. That's absolutely fair. The whole point of that anecdote isn't to say that social media isn't important. It is. But what I'm saying is the website is still a big part of what we do, maybe even never went away. We stopped focusing on it. We put our focus everywhere, but it maybe never went away. And what we've got to do now is use some of these strategies as social media atomizes. We're going to need to use some of those strategies. And yes, one of them might end up being the WebRing. And there's other people like smarter than me that are going to come up with stuff that we're going to immediately say, oh, that's a good idea. I want to do that too. But we're going to be doing a lot of stuff and it's going to revolve around your website.
Yep. And I want to say the one thing we haven't talked about, but I a little bit suspect that this is true in that whenever there is a paradigm shift, you always have to say, like, who's going to be the winner in all this? My suspicion, Brad, that one of the winners of this process, we haven't talked about this at all, will be webtoons, because an 18, a 19, a 20-year-old will search comics for free to read on the web, and they won't find Twitter links, or they won't see us on this or that, but they might find webtoons. And even though I don't currently want to go to webtoons because of some contractual things that I don't want to agree to, I do think the people that are on there are probably going to weather this storm pretty well. If I'm just being honest about it. That doesn't mean I want to build my career on webtoons. Doesn't mean I'm recommending webtoons. Doesn't mean I think you should do webtoons. I'm just saying I think that their audiences will weather the storm in this process, because it's like a rock in a storm. Like people will know where to go for comics, and it's going to be webtoons.
Yeah, I left webtoons in a huff many, maybe over a year ago, when they took down one of my comics because they said that I had somebody naked, and they were clearly wearing clothes, but they were in what we would call like a one-piece swimsuit type of thing. And they said, no, that's too much. And I'm like, well, listen, if that's too much, then I'm in the wrong place. That's okay. Not every place has to be for me. And I backed out. This past couple of weeks, I've been giving a lot of thought of starting back up there, or maybe even going back to Tapastic, because again, those are going to be good places to be. Yeah. It might just be the thing that brings me back to not placing my career there, but mirroring my comic there. Absolutely, that might come back again, because we're going to need to pull out a lot of stuff. Because that's
the right way to look at that. Yes, we're going to need to pull out a lot of stuff. Yeah,
we're going to have to be nimble. We're going to have to be quick on our feet, and creative. And listen, we got into this business to be creative. A part of me, and there's a reason that this has been a topic for the last several issues of ComicLab, and because Dave's the same way. Part of me, I'm terrified, right? Because if I launch my Kickstarter next January or February, I literally do not know what my game plan is for that 30-day period, and that terrifies me.
Yeah,
that terrifies me. You know what else? It also excites me to no end. That's a creative challenge that I can sink my teeth. Tell me I'm not right.
You're right. You're right. I do.
This is a creative challenge that is, we are up to this challenge, and it's going to be exciting as hell to try and see if we can solve it.
I will say this, because you are a great guidepost for me on this, in that the optimism of, oh, hell, this might be fun to try to figure out a new way to get comics to people. It might be that. Let's look at it that way. Is there going to be a lot of stumbling? Yes. Is there going to be a loss of income? A percentage of which, yes. But it's going to be fun to try to figure it out again and get comics to people in new ways. And maybe it will make for better websites on our part. I think we already were improving our websites based on incorporating Patreon into our personally hosted sites, which Brad recommended to me, and I strongly recommend. And maybe iterations of ideas like that will start to come from Twitter falling apart. So, yes, with change comes pain, but with change also comes opportunity. And so I think that's a great way to end it, Brad, is that we're obviously going to keep talking about this. It's not something that's going to be over tomorrow. We're going to be talking about strategies. For now, just a reminder of what we recommend. Pragmatism wins the day. Stay on Twitter, keep sharing on Twitter. I still personally have 95% of the audience that I had 2 months ago. So I might as well keep talking to them. Be aware that it's going to start breaking. I personally would recommend trying to start weaning yourself off of it on a personal level, but maybe not. If that's not for you, that I don't think that's a necessary or a given that you have to do that. But I found it helpful. I'm already 2 weeks out, and I'm already in a better place about not using Twitter. It's once you get past a certain stage, it's actually quite lovely on the other side. So there's that. And then I would say just keep definitely, as we always recommend, this is a time to keep your head on a swivel. Park your names on multiple social media sites that are coming if you think that's a good idea. But I wouldn't necessarily start fire hose spraying your audience to all the different ones. Let it play out a little bit. Let the chicken egg problem sort itself out, and then recommend Hive or Mastodon or Pillow Fort when you do have a sense that that's where you want to park it permanently.
Absolutely. And just to bring all this together with the earlier part of this conversation, we just touched on, we were talking about the different waves or the different phases of webcomics. the ad system drying up was painful as hell.
Yes.
It was terrifying. It was imagine
terrifying.
how think about how terrified we are right now. The ad system drying up was super terrifying. But I think I touched on this before, but I'm going to reiterate it. Getting through that brought us to crowdfunding. And there's not hardly a single person who's crowdfunding today who would ever want to go back to the ad system.
I would not want to go back.
You can search far and wide. There's not too many of them out there. I'm sure there's a couple of contrarians out there, but there's not too many people that once they see what crowdfunding could do would ever want to go back to ads. So yes, this is going to be terrifying. We're going to be right there with you through it all, shaking our knees and white knuckling it like we're in the passenger seat of a Toyota Tacoma. We're going to be right there next to you going on this trip. Yeah. But you got to be optimistic. On the other side of this is a whole new way of doing things that we haven't quite even sussed out yet.
Yep.
And it's probably going to be even better, right?
Yeah. And so the trick to this is much like any tricky point in your life is that you look to the helpers. And so you'll definitely want to check in with your comics community to see what people, because there's going to be people that are experimenting and publicly sharing their helpful advice, saying, look, I know I might not be the pillar of great advice, but I did X, Y, Z and it worked really well. And that's the kind of thing you're going to want to be checking in with communities, much like ComicLab's Discord, much like other forums online, checking out on your heroes and peers and seeing what they're doing. And going forward with, frankly, 10% more energy than you had to have 6 months ago, because we got to keep on it. So, And you want to pay attention to all of those people, unless they're the ones who are suggesting Mastodon. You want to ignore those. But Dave, he's not going to let it go. Oh, that's funny.
No, like a dog with a bone. But we've got great news, because there's another topic that's a huge topic in webcomics that we've kind of haven't gotten a chance to circle around to, partially because it's the kind of topic that we really needed to bring in somebody that had a really deep catalog knowledge of the topic and had a deep catalog knowledge of comics specifically, and we found that person. Yeah,
so I recorded this next interview last week with Bill Barnes, previously of Unshelved. I had 12, 15 years drawing Unshelved, and then also works in machine learning and a tiny bit in AI at Microsoft. And really wanted to talk to him about this intersection of cartooning and artificial intelligence, how things suddenly came about so quickly, where to go next, and what to do about it. And I found it to be a really wonderful chat. So let's have a listen, and we'll come back in a second. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. So today I want to welcome Bill Barnes on the show, as I think he's the perfect crossover to discuss AI and cartooning and AI. Bill was the cartoonist of Unshelved, a delightful library-focused comic strip that's still available at unshelved.com. The strip ran for 15 years, generated a basket full of books, many of which are on my shelves, and also hundreds of talks around the country to tens of thousands of book lovers. He also made the tech startup comic strip Not Invented Here, which ran for 6 years, and in a wonderful parallel for us for today, he's also had many roles at Microsoft over the years. A notable recent position was general manager of a computer vision application called Loeb, which, Bill, that incorporated machine learning, did it not? Am I remembering correctly?
It definitely does. Yes.
Yes. So I want to start today. First of all, thank you for coming to do this. I appreciate this.
Dave, I'm not only happy to be here, but I'm intimidated by your energy level at 7:30 p.m. because I am a middle-aged man, and this is already past my bedtime. So I'm gonna try to match you.
I gotta tell you, when you've married a Cuban like I did, you become comfortable with espressos at 7 o'clock at night. That's it's just part of the life. That's just part of in Miami, they're going strong at 2 a.m. Anyway, so I want to say, first of all, speaking purely from an artist perspective, this leap in AI, frankly, caught me off guard. And I was sort of expecting this, for like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And I wanted to ask you, as you are much closer in the industry, did this catch you off guard and people that work with AI on a somewhat regular basis off guard?
Yeah, it did. It took me by surprise. I cannot really speak for anybody.
Sure, no.
But like, if I think about my general sort of like cloud of people I know at work, everyone was pretty gobstopped to see DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, and starting to do these amazing things, do them quickly, do them relatively cheaply. Yep, that was pretty amazing.
And so, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, so to me, so far, the field for this hot minute is sort of dominated by 3 AI systems: Midjourney, DALL-E, and Stable Diffusion. Obviously, 6 months from now, it'll be 9 new programs that we haven't heard of. But can you, for the average person or the average artist, explain what is happening on average with these 3 when I put in a prompt that says Bill Barnes, bikini, Miami Beach, and it generates a beautiful image of Bill Barnes. No, but in all seriousness,
purely a hypothetical
Midjourney use on my part. Don't search my history. No. So what is happening when I type in that prompt, and then within God-stoppingly small amount of time, an image is generated?
Yeah. So what's going on is it's using these new generation of software that produces images is using a technique called diffusion. And what's interesting about it is actually about noise reduction. And so it was from a technology that's like, oh, here's a photo, but it's so grainy and full of noise that it's impossible to understand what's going on. But we're going to progressively improve the image. Okay. Kind of the enhanced thing, like from Blade Runner. Like enhance this thing and it all goes away.
And is a lot of that like A/B choices? Like you're telling the computer, like, does this pixel have value? No, then get rid of it. And then slowly reducing noise or reducing pixelation. Is that the idea from the original versions?
Yeah. So one way to think about this, and I'm super not an expert in this stuff, but I did get my friend and former colleague Marcus Speisinger on the phone, and he explained it to me, and I'm immediately going to just completely get it all wrong as I explained.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine.
There's sort of lots of directions the image could go. So you can imagine this, and it's called the latent space. But you can imagine like, oh, well, what if we change this pixel and this pixel and this pixel? And so there's this sort of orbit around the image of I'm moving my hands around as if your audio listeners.
No, but people can feel the energy though of what you're doing, Bill, which is great.
Okay, good. So you can imagine sort of all the potentials, alternate universes, if you will, variants of this image. And what you want is something that will steer it in the direction that you want it to go. And so actually it combined that with the other thing that's been going on, which is all of this amazing text stuff known as GPT-3, general predictive text, which is this thing that you can say, write a Harry Potter story about my visit to the convenience store. And it will do an amazingly good job of that thing you just described.
GPT-3 has in the last, 18, 24 months, gotten very good, scarily good at especially certain kinds of writing. It's really, really good.
And so the thing I was surprised to hear is these two technologies are related.
Oh, really?
Because what you're doing is as you look at all these variants, this latent space, steered in the direction of some text that you just described, and that technology kind of comes from the same place. Its ability to kind of understand at some level what that text represents. And so you can think of it as there's a lot of text on the internet that's associated with images. Right. And if you pass a certain amount of that, like, hundreds of millions, billions of images, then the computer starts getting pretty good at associating a given piece of text with what an image might look like. Okay. And it can say, oh, of these 10 variants, this one feels a little bit more like the thing you just described about Bill.
And that's happening on a statistical level, right? It's not okay. Yeah. So,
it really doesn't understand anything.
And exactly. And so, when you're seeing because as people that have used this, as you're seeing it progress, you can sort of pause the image at any given time. And if you've asked for, a man on the beach, let's go back to that one, you'll see half an arm drawn, sort of down at the side and another fully realized arm. is that sort of the latency period there. It wasn't sure which way it wanted the arm to go, and now it's slowly reinforcing. And if you let it keep drawing, that second arm will disappear, and the computer will sort of reinforce that stronger version of the arm. Is that the right way to describe that?
Yeah, because it's doing a bunch of random stuff. And, a couple of arms floating in the air is sort of more in the direction of what you described than just a piece of random noise. So it's kind of going in the right direction.
Right. It's closer to human than it is to noise. Yeah. Yes, again.
Yes. And you can tell it how many iterations to go, and it should just keep getting more and more in the direction of the thing you described.
Right.
And sometimes it'll get there faster, more or less randomly, because it happened to pick a good version, and sometimes it won't. But the more iterations you do, the more likely you'll converge on what you want.
And let me ask you this. So this is where I'm super naive on this. When I plug in the 10 or 15 or 20 words that are my prompt, it's going to, and this is where I'm naive. It goes to the cloud, Bill, but where is it specifically going to? What level of intensity of computing should I think of as the average person that this is going to?
Yeah. So what's super interesting is that while DALL-E exists on the cloud, and I think that's true for Midjourney, Stable Diffusion you can actually run on your own computer. Like I have it running on my MacBook.
Right.
So I have a last year's M1 Pro MacBook Pro,
which is an amazing laptop, but it's
an amazing laptop.
Far more consumer class than I would have guessed would be needed for this. Is it completely isolated, fine. Bill? It's not calling on any other assets?
It's totally.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I downloaded the software, it downloads, I think it's 4.2 gigabytes of what it comes down to is images. Okay. And it's using those as kind of the raw material to put the stuff together.
Wow. I mean, to me, it's okay. So just again, going back to my naivete about it, it seems to be faster and more efficient and less computing power than I ever would have imagined. And I don't quite understand how this has made this leap. Can you give a non-computing person like myself a sense of how this was achieved? Well,
what you just said is it's all those things more than you would expect. And so partly this question is just about what Dave's brain, what sort of expectations you have.
Right.
And I think maybe we're just assuming that computers have to chug away for hours or days to do these things. And the techniques keep improving. It's that simple. Like the techniques just get improving. This isn't how computers generated images a couple of years ago, or even last year. That was a totally different technology called GAN, adversarial networks. Which is you would have kind of two things generating random images, and you would have a little contest to see which was better. This turns out to be so much more efficient because of this diffusion technique, and I cannot tell you why.
Yeah. So what's amazing to me is the sort of starting, I always pronounce the Latin wrong, but the sort of starting ex nihilo process. So if you pause any of these generative AIs at the very early part of the process, you'll see like, you've typed in a prompt of like a beachside cliff. We'll stay with the beach. And at first it starts with the cliff on the left side. At first it starts with it on, and then switches over to the right side, and then it moves it to the foreground and then kind of the background. And you see that it is literally, it's not
throwing shit at the wall.
It's literally throwing shit at the wall, but it's not really unlike, if we're being honest about it, Bill, and this is why it's so fun to have you on as a cartoonist, it's not unlike how you and I, if we're on a flight somewhere and we're bored, we're just sketching. And we're like, well, I don't know, let's try the cliff over here. No, that doesn't work. Let's try the cliff over there. That doesn't work.
I remember years ago, Gene Ambaum, my collaborator, friend shelved, and Jim DiMinakis, who for a little while worked for us as our marketer before he went off to do Emerald City Comic Con full time. We were brainstorming ideas for the cover for our 5th book, Read Responsibly.
Right.
And so I just sat there with a notebook and we would just sort of throw stuff out there. And some of that stuff was really stupid, but we were in the brainstorm mode of there's no bad ideas. And it's kind of like that. There's a brainstorm mode going idea. It's throwing a bunch of stuff out and some of it's good and a lot of it's bad. I dropped a lot of names in that story.
I did. I was very impressed by that. Well, but I mean,
also President Clinton walked by and gave his advice.
I'm high-fiving Mother Teresa as she was getting on her flight. Yeah, exactly. So I guess what I'm saying here is that purely by accident, in the sense of how this generative stuff literally starts from pixels and builds upwards or reduces noise as you were describing it, how quickly that becomes a human-like process of of idea creation or idea fiddling. You know what I mean? And I think that's what I'm so fascinated.
And sort of recognizably so, which is what you're saying.
Yes,
it feels familiar.
It feels familiar. It feels akin to how humans create. And so,
by the way, can I just add one more thing?
Of course.
You don't have to start with nothing. At least with Stable Diffusion, you can actually give it a starter image.
Right.
And it accelerates the process quite a bit. And so you could say, and there's a great blog post about this, and I'll try to come up with a URL so you can drop it into your podcast. But basically, I want to have like a pyramid with the Millennium Falcon flying overhead at dawn.
I do want that, by the
now,
way.
If you just say that, it'll generate that, right? Right. Yeah. But what you can do is just draw like literally just an outline, like a stick figure of a pyramid, and it actually assists it in giving you what you want because instead of having to get there, you kind of advanced it in the process.
Well, let me ask you this. So I, after I don't know how many years, 25 years of Sheldon, I have something like 5,000 JPEGs and PNGs and GIFs of Sheldon that I could feed into this thing.
I'm sorry, GIFs?
GIFs? I don't know. Listen, you're the fancy Microsoft
we'll
guy. I don't know. I don't know your fancy language, Bill. So I could feed them all in, correct? But then am I in any way endangering my IP, my copyright, as Stable Diffusion is somehow going to share it back with the mother system? Or
oh boy, that's a great question. Well, I think if it's running on your computer and you you disconnect the internet, you're probably safe. I don't know what's going on with Dolly and Midjourney.
Yeah, as far as being more
I don't knowing how these things tend to work, unless they are just literally saving the image for creating the next version of the model, which they probably aren't, then you're probably safe. But it's a lot of probablys, and let's not assume anything.
And I'm not putting you on the spot as like you have the final word on that. I guess what I'm saying is unlike some of our peers, I would like to incorporate AI generation into my process. And for me, it's like, hey, I'd like 30 quick ideas on how to do this beach cliff or how to do, this forest scene. I'm not going to commit to any of them, but I might use some of them. If I'm being honest, I'll drag it over into Photoshop and trace over it and move things around. But it saved me sort of that early sketching period that you just talked about when you were working with your coworkers, and what I do when I'm working on my stuff. So for me, I see a really useful part of it, but I'm afraid to incorporate any of my existing art with the fear that IP might then get incorporated into somebody else's generative process through the cloud. So that's where I'm coming at. I'm not putting that on you in terms of like answer that question, Bill. I'm just saying that's where I'm coming from.
Well, you're paranoid, but that doesn't mean people aren't out to get you.
I mean, yes. Well, with the idea that a lot of these systems, especially Midjourney and DALL-E, seem to be building off of some library somewhere of existing art. And especially when you type in, in the style of Picasso, and it does a really good approximation of, Picasso's blue period. And you're like, well, okay, it's clearly pulling off of Picasso's library from that 5-year blue period,
Look, I guess what I'm saying is technically I don't think there's much benefit in them doing that stuff, and I can't make any promises about what they're doing with anything you might upload. That's why I like using the local version of Stable Diffusion.
Yeah, I'll have to say that I definitely want to install that one to try it out, because I'm intrigued by a local copy that I can control.
Here's a question, though. It would be interesting to ask one of these things to do something in the style of Dave Kellett and see if that happens to be something it knows about.
And it's just better than what I draw. Wouldn't that be heartbreaking? Okay, so I see 3 options for where or how cartoonists can do this. One is you can ignore it and you can refuse to use it. And that's totally valid. You can just go forward and say, like, listen, I'm a cartoonist. I create images. I generate my own images, and never the twain shall meet, right? The other one is to, as I think I might like to do, incorporate parts of it into your workflow. For right now, for me, that's not idea generative. What's the way I would describe it? Lord, a sketch generative. Like, give me 30 options for how I could lay out this page. Give me 30 options for this beach cliff. But in the
this is your intern.
Exactly.
Oh, intern, give me 30 landscapes.
I want 30 landscapes before noon. I'm making myself another espresso. Exactly. But so another way I could see this coming down the pipe is that you could have certain stages of your process where you say, I have finished this line art layer. Now, generative AI, I want you to color this in the style of, and you can fill in 7 or 8 famous Marvel or DC colorists, right? And one would be noir, one would be bright and happy My Little Pony. Is there stuff like that coming down the pipe where you can isolate steps in the process and have the AI generate options there?
I don't know what's coming down the pipe, but I will say this. You just have to assume it all is.
Yeah.
So I was just having a conversation with a friend this afternoon about music. And when the iPhone first came out, there's this app called Capo, still there. And what it would do is you could load in some music, it would analyze it, and it would tell you, this is this chord. This is this note that's being played here. This is this chord. It was great because it allowed you to kind of deconstruct a song so you could play it yourself. Like I played the ukulele, and it was just great to sort of, instead of having to go on the internet and say, what are the chords for this song and trust whoever it entered, I could literally analyze the song.
Right.
And that was done using very classical techniques. That has advanced so much because of machine learning that now you can say, I want to isolate the vocals and the clarinets and the keyboard and the drums.
Right.
You can just like unmix a song into its components and then remix it. Like that kind of crazy stuff is going on.
Right.
And it's both wonderful and frightening, and it both aids the creative process, but also hijacks it a little bit. And you just kind of have to assume it's all heading in every direction you might imagine it would go.
Yeah.
And it can do, and it will be able to do anything at some point.
Well, you know this.
And maybe sooner, to your point from earlier, sooner than you
Let me ask you this, because this is maybe a helpful way to ask this question, maybe it's not. But you working for Microsoft, which famously, I would think, got rid of an entire secretarial class in the United States and all around the world, because you no longer needed a secretarial class, because any employee could now do MS Office. You could do your own spreadsheets. You could do your own very beautifully typed up Microsoft Word. I mean, I'm literally going back 25, 30 years now, not anything recent, but the idea of like,
but it's nice that you kept Dolores on. Like you don't need her, but she had a family.
What? Oddly, Dolores has a lot of institutional knowledge that people don't give credit for. No, but what I'm getting at here is that like
she knows where the bodies are buried.
But like Microsoft specifically got rid of an entire class of office worker because it just did it better and it did it easier and it did it with no fuss. And so there's some concern with cartoonists that generative AI. Option A is it could become a tool that just replaces a noisier part, a messier part of the process, but it's still being operated by a human. Do you have any sense that option B might happen, where anybody who has no artistic skill suddenly now can replace a cartoonist just using generative AI? Do you see that coming down the pipe?
Maybe not any cartoonist, but definitely you. Like specifically. That's what we're all working towards.
That's the best possible answer to that. I'm very glad you used that joke. Thank you. I think...
So I'll tell you, look, again, like everything you fear is coming is how I see it. I don't know when, but it's all coming.
Right.
This stuff is just rolling forward and there's no putting it back in the box. But I have a pretty optimistic take on it, I guess.
Okay.
So there's the things that are going to come sooner, the things that are going to come later. And the things that are going to come later happen to be many of the things I value. And one of them is a sense of humor. And one of them is like, and that connects to another thing, which is understanding human nature. And so I think that, at least for me, what I want, like, I'm a very reluctant artist. I like drawing okay. I actually kind of got burned out drawing comics for 15 years, and I still haven't drawn in like 6-7 years, except like maybe once or twice a year I'll do something. I kind of like the idea of just sitting down. Like, did you watch the last episode of the last season of Westworld?
Yes.
So there's a really nice thing where you have this creator, this writer, and she's like, a girl sits on her porch while her father takes a nap, and it kind of does a thing for her. And she's like, well, not like that, a little bit more like this. And I loved it. I love this idea that I could describe what I want to have the computer assist me in telling the story I want to tell.
Right.
Like, that's very exciting for me. And I've worked with a couple of artists. I've worked with Paul Southworth. I worked with Jeff Sukale, and they're great artists and stuff. And there's a part of me that like, they were great. And I also just sort of wouldn't mind the purity of just having a computer to shape whatever's in my head in the most direct way possible. It's very exciting for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm lazy.
No, but I do see your optimism. And I'll tell you, I'll go even further back in media. There was a Star Trek The Next Generation episode where the crew gets to a planet where they have they don't, if I remember correctly, they don't have kids anymore. So they're trying to steal the enterprise's kids, if I remember the story correctly. But what they do have is technology that all you literally need to do is think it, and the art can be made even from a child's mind, right? And even at a young age, I was like, that is amazing. The idea of thought made real, basically. And so I do share your optimism that in some ways our hands have been trying to make our thoughts real with our cartooning for decades now. And this is maybe a not a purer path, but in some ways a really satisfying and possibly, like you said, optimistic path of art creation. So
I want to say being an artist is more than just the technical skill to put stuff on paper. It's actually making the choices of this is good and this is bad and this is better.
Right.
And so I think all of that translates really nicely to this conversation we've been having, which is the computer essentially giving you choices. And you can say more like this, less like this. I want this to be more of a blue. I want this to be more in the style of a Dave Kellett.
Right.
Right. And kind of shape whatever is in your head. I like that. And that feels like in almost more important than the manual skill of I'm good at putting ink on paper.
Right. And I think, by the way, that will still have, in the same way that Brad and I were joking before, that we become bespoke soap makers, that because, like the small town, the tourist town, you're selling the bespoke soaps. But there will always be a value, I think, for the manual side of things. But I do share your optimism that this could literally be Bill inviting me into your dreams or thoughts made real, and I inviting you into my dreams or thoughts made real with the help of generative AI.
Or a nightmare, as some might call it.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, thank you, Bill, for coming on. You were awesome. I really appreciate talking with you today about this. I genuinely, I appreciate both as a perspective of someone who has been at the drawing table for 15 years and someone who's been similarly working on bringing products to market like you did with Loeb and getting it shipped, and how those two worlds kind of meet up in this weird AI moment for these three, Midjourney, DALL-E, and Stable Diffusion. So anyway, thank you for coming on and talking about this.
It is my pleasure, and I hope I didn't butcher the facts and the technology too badly.
No, you're a good man. You're a good man.
Man, that was a really interesting interview. I learned some stuff about AI, and I learned things I didn't know, and I think I've got a way better handle on it than I used to have.
Well, I got to tell you, as the year ends, I always make my software and my computer purchases mainly for tax write-offs at the end of December, and I think now I'm going to get a Mac Studio, whatever it used to be called a Mac Mini, but now it's like double in size and it's got the two chips welded together. I'm going to throw a couple dollars at that thing because I kind of want to. I know you don't, but I kind of want to install my own personal copy of Stable Diffusion just to ideate, just to say, give me 10 different ways that I could lay out this page, or 10 ways I could draw this cliff face, and just see what that could be in terms of process. I kind of want to experiment with it. I'm not saying it's the answer, but I do want to experiment with it. So I'll be reporting back on that in 2023 if I end up throwing the cash down for this giant Mac Mini.
Well, no, and actually I had the same thought, surprisingly enough, because when I found out that you could have your own instance and you could do this without putting your stuff any more out there than it already is.
Yes.
I thought, that might have a little bit of usefulness. So, I'm not 100% against it. I'm slowly warming up to the idea. So
can I tell you?
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, this is the weird paranoia, though, that I have about it. I'm only going to launch Stable Diffusion when I have my Wi-Fi turned off. And then I will close the program when I turn my Wi-Fi before I turn my Wi-Fi back on. I'm going to close the program because I don't 100% trust it not to send something back with my art to the sort of mother server. You know what I mean? I don't want my art basically. Listen, my art is already publicly available. There's 5,000 versions of Dave Kellett's Sheldon publicly available. So any AI that wants to has already scraped that site. Let's be honest about that. But I just don't want to. I don't want to actively help any existing body of AI reference art by giving it my art. So I don't know. Maybe that's me just being stupid, but I'm going to turn off the Wi-Fi when I use Stable Diffusion, I think.
Well, and listen, I think you're being smart because at the end of the day, trust is important. right?
Yep.
And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about trust, and trust is important. That's why our listeners always tune into us every week, because for better or for worse, they trust us. If not to have the right answer, at least to have an interesting one. And by golly, we're happy that you're here with us every week. This is Brad Geiger, and I just want to remind you that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And a huge shout out and a thank you again to Bill Barnes for joining me this week. Bill Barnes of Unshelved and of Microsoft. A wonderful chat, and we thank you, Bill, for that. And also for our Comic Lab friends over at the Comic Lab Live Gab joining us every week. And I will say also, remember, dreamhost.com/Comic Lab. That's where you want to go in this time of change to host and build your own website. So the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, then you may hear your review featured on a future episode. And hey, if you haven't gotten a chance to do it yet, make sure you swing over to Spotify. Keep us right up at the top of the comics podcast over there. We're doing fantastic, and mainly it's because of people like you giving us that 5-star review, keeping us right up at the top.
And that's a reminder to me to say Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/Comic Lab. So go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/ remember to follow Brad on Mastodon at Brad Geiger, at Pickle Juice, at Mastodon server number 48, at left ventricle, at they're so easy to find, those social media handles for Mastodon.
Yeah, you just gotta look. I'm right there.
He's right. Brad's been right there the whole time. Yeah. It's so easy to find him. Don't forget, and left ventricle, at Pickle Juice, at Mastodon server number 48. It's very easy. I don't know why people are complaining about Mastodon.
My username's very easy to remember. It's Brad Geiger 3. Not 1 or 2. Those 2 didn't get through. But Brad Geiger 3. If they ever get around to approving it, I'm going to be at Brad Geiger 3.
So, Brad, on Twitter, when you say something out loud, you tweet it, right?
Yeah.
On Mastodon, it's a toot, Brad. It's a toot.
A toot is what Grandma Geiger used to do after she had too much 3-bean salad.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say a toot is the grandmother in front of you in church, and you're like, well, there we go. I guess now we're tooting.
Oh, and you always with the Catholics, you always had those wood benches. Not even a cushion. It was just
the right vibrato, you know.
If you wanted to amplify that sound, you'd want it to be wood. If you wanted to decrease the sound, you'd put somebody on a pad or a mattress or something. But no, the Catholics, solid wood. So you couldn't even sneak that out if you kind of sat on your side. All of a sudden, everybody within 3 pews knew what was going on.
So on Mastodon, keep an eye out for toots, and remember, 1 spoonful of Metamucil, not 2.
Well, yeah, that's what my server recommended.